Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the closing ceremony of the 10th South Asia Economic Summit. We hope that over the past 3 days, we've had a fruitful learning experience, and we would like to start this closing ceremony by inviting Dr. Paras Kharil, Research Director, South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Nepal, for the presentation of the conference, summary of the conference proceedings.
Respected Chair, Dr. Poshraj Pandey, Honorable Dr. Swarnim Wagle, distinguished delegates on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, it has been 2.5 days of rich, productive and candid discussions among a cross-section of stakeholders from all 8 South Asian countries. In deliberations spanning 4 plenary sessions, and 14 parallel sessions, parliamentarians, policymakers, academics, researchers, and private sector entrepreneurs, among others, have articulated elements of a vision for shared prosperity and the pathways for realizing it in a region that is still mired in poverty, deprivation, and inequality. The gracious presence of honorable ministers in the inaugural session added to the gravitas of the 10th South Asia Economic Summit. Under the overall theme of deepening economic integration for inclusive and sustainable development, a range of topics spanning different facets of development were up for discussions. I do not dare summarize all the discussions that have taken place, covering them in all their richness and nuances. I make no such pretense. What follows is an attempt to give a flavor of the deliberations, but rest assured, the painstaking process of transcribing the entire proceedings to be fed into a comprehensive summary document will be underway soon after the summit. That, we hope, will have a chance of doing justice to the views and thoughts expressed and the recommendations flowing out of them. It would be remiss of me not to thank our team at SAES for doubling up as rapporteurs, even as they juggled with other tasks of organization. With SAARC struggling to even hold its annual summits, there were robust discussions over its relevance and future. Participants rued the decline in regional integration over the last 70 years due to policy-induced barriers, and emphasized that the rationale for regional cooperation is ever stronger, what with the changing nature of production and trade worldwide, and the shooting into prominence of climate change challenges. SAARC, or for that matter the regional integration project under it, delegates seemed to concur, is not alive and kicking, but neither is it dead. Economic integration efforts should not just focus on trade, but also bring within its ambit investment cooperation and as simple a step as easing visa processes to facilitate people-to-people contact. There were views that ownership among the South Asian youth of the idea of a shared South Asian prosperity was critical for taking regional integration forward. And indeed, the summit has seen an active participation of the youth. There were at times spirited, candid exchanges about complex bilateral relationships, which serve to highlight at once the challenges to deepening economic integration and the potential held by regional cooperation efforts to generate a peace and stability dividend. Suggestions were made for reinvigorating the regional body, including by reforming its architecture, modalities for decision-making, and strengthening its secretariat, and drawing on lessons from more successful regional integration projects elsewhere. It was noted that while countries are turning to sub-regional and trans-regional initiatives, there are ample opportunities to leverage them to foster regional integration in its entirety. It was recognized that the rise of China in the immediate neighborhood, also an observer to SAARC, cannot be ignored. And with several South Asian countries already engaging substantially with China and having joined the Belt and Road Initiative, it is high time to strategize how to utilize this initiative towards regional ends for South Asia's collective interest, including for South Asian integration, and that the economic logic for this is overwhelming. This came as a recurring, almost a cross-cutting point. Also discussed at length in a dedicated session was the potential role of other observers, some of whom are important development partners bilaterally for most South Asian countries, in helping member states achieve the sustainable development goals, as well as aiding the regional integration process through, among other things, investment, transport connectivity, and technology transfer. The possibilities of tapping the observers are tremendous, but remain untapped. Using observers as dialogue partners was also suggested. Candid discussions were also held on the challenges associated with seeking a deeper engagement of the observers. The imperative of keeping the SARC House in order and strengthening its secretariat while seeking greater and effective engagement of observers was also recognized. On trade, the challenges posed by non-tariff barriers to interregional trade were discussed and possible solutions suggested. The causes of substantial amounts of informal trade that persist in the region were analyzed, and research gaps impeding a better understanding of the phenomenon of informal trade were identified. On investment, it was noted that there exist enormous opportunities for investors to integrate both horizontally as well as vertically, which however require complementary policies in addressing transport and logistics services constraints, lowering local transaction costs across the region, attracting intra-regional and extra-regional FDI, as well as involving local small and medium enterprises. Expediting the draft regional agreement on investment promotion and protection was emphasized. On migration and remittances, the common challenges facing quite a few South Asian countries that come with the dependence on remittances from migrant workers abroad were discussed. It was highlighted while South Asia achieved much of its MDG goals, there remain high levels of inequality, and creating productive employment, investment in human capital, broadening social protection, and access to infrastructure and finance are among the key priorities in South Asian economic integration focused on obtaining SDGs. On regional energy cooperation, the pathways for regionalizing cooperation that is currently proceeding on a bilateral basis was discussed. On environment and climate change, the fact that pollution and black carbon emissions transcend national boundaries, calling for a regional response, served as a powerful reminder of the urgency for regional cooperation. There were also deliberations on new issues in international trade, generated by advancements in information and communications technology. Issues such as e-trade, what does it take for South Asia to benefit from it? What are the key elements for the success of e-trade in helping firms integrate into international trade? The opportunities and challenges associated with new sources of data, using new sources of data, satellite data, for example, to improve measurement of socioeconomic outcomes, and the mammoth task of collecting data for monitoring progress towards SDGs were also discussed. Discussions were also held on governance of intellectual property in the area of plant and genetic resources, from the perspective of farmers' rights, strengthening rural economies through innovations and small and medium enterprises, with examples of how the private sector has been able to successfully use innovations and technologies to strengthen rural economies and promote women entrepreneurship, and the need to make innovations low cost while considering the potential adverse effects on the environment. Ideas, too, were generated on harnessing regional value chains for employment generation. Last but not least, in the last or final plenary that ended just a while ago, rich tributes were paid to the late Saman Kalegama, an eminent figure in the research and policy communities in South Asia, who worked tirelessly for the regional integration agenda, and a person to whom the South Asia Economic Summit owes its very conception. His very absence is palpable in this 10th anniversary of the summit. We miss you all, Saman, your scholarship, your humility, your friendship, and your vision for a harmonious and prosperous South Asia. It is incumbent on us all to take this vision forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paras Kharil, for the summary of the conference proceedings. And now it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, the Executive Director of SDPI, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Islamabad, Pakistan, is also the organizer designate of the 11th edition of South Asia Economic Summit.
Once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my gratitude and big congratulations to Dr. Poshraj Pandey for holding this very successful 10th edition of South Asia Economic Summit. I'm glad to accept the responsibilities for holding the next South Asia Economic Summit in Islamabad. And the reason is very simple. Of course, according to rotation, it was Sri Lanka's turn. I remember when Nepal was hit by earthquake, Saman Kalegama, he phoned me late in the evening, which he usually he never did. And he asked me, he said that I don't think due to this earthquake, Saudi would be able to organize 8th South Asia Economic Summit. So I'm approaching you, Abid Bhai, would you be able to do it? And I said, of course, I have to do it since you are saying me to do so. And last night when Dushni informed that IPS would be busy in organizing someone's memorial reference in June, so it may be logistically difficult for them to organize this 11th South Asia Economic Summit. So I immediately volunteered. I realized that if someone was alive, you could have done the same as he did in during 8th Economic Summit, that Nepal is, Saudi is having trouble, will you be able to do it? So again, if IPS is having trouble, STPI would be more than happy to do it. So I look forward to welcome you all in Pakistan. The tentative dates, if they don't clash with the WTO, would be 4th, 5th, and 6th of December 2018, which is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we still have to know that what are the dates in Argentina for the next WTO, but I hope if they don't clash, so it would be the first week of working week of December, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Thank you very much for posing your trust, and I welcome you, and I look forward to have most of you there. One thing that I would like to request to our co-organizer, that is talking among each other wouldn't suffice. I can assure you I'll bring the highest level of political participation in Islamabad, but I would request you to reciprocate. So please bring your political decision makers, and you will find that we will reciprocate it from Islamabad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Suleri. Now I'd like to request Mr. Vishnu Prasad Lamsal, Member Secretary of the National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal, for his remarks.
Thank you. Chairman of the closing ceremony, dignitaries in the dais, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and namaste. It is a matter of pleasure for me to address this closing session of the 10th South Asia Economic Summit, which I believe was successful in achieving its objectives. I highly appreciate your active participation, lively discussion, and constructive feedback in the plenaries and parallel sessions. I firmly believe that the ideas generated here and deliberations made by extraordinarily eminent speakers would lay the foundation for prudent policies and robust actions to be adopted to integrate our regional economies. In these 3 days, we have discussed various issues resolving around the theme of summit. There are several takeaways from economic, social, and political perspectives. The consensus, nevertheless, is to work together to have a deepened regional integration by breaking all barriers, further exploring the areas of mutual benefits from each other development process was in the point of discussion. Mr. Chair, please allow me to highlight some key areas for strong economic ties among us. Enhanced intra-regional trade captures the height of debates. Improving connectivity, lowering the transaction cost, building the climate resilience infrastructure, modernizing the procedures, and shortening the sensitive list demands the highest level of attention. When 90% of intra-regional trade is covered by only 2 or 3 countries, an all-round look into the region is required. Leaving political issue behind, we need to work together in economic agenda to eliminate all barriers and informalities in cross-border trade among us. Productive investment is a key to increase the economic dynamism in the region, improving the investment climate, strengthening the doing business practices, and reforming the legal and other procedure have to get extra focus, and the countries need to put more efforts in this area. The third area I want to highlight is the connectivity, absence of which dilutes all our aspirations to boost intra-regional economic relations. As some of us have been improving such connectivity through SASEC, BIMSTEC, BBIN, and other SARC initiatives, more pushes ensure their sustainability. Building sustainable ICT infrastructure is another area of connectivity to improve. Joining in BRI has also widened the scope of better connectivity within and outside the region. I would like to emphasize for adopting the synergetic approach in regional development initiatives. As South Asia is endowed with wide range of natural resources, harnessing them for broader benefit is possible only when synergies are identified. The integrated approach is beneficial not only to ensure mutual benefits but also to have a better economic relation among us. Mr. Chair, our region is a home of 13.3% population living in extreme poverty. The figure is quite high compared to global 9.6%. Given the slow pace of poverty reduction in the region, a huge challenge is posed to attain SDG by 2030. Increased development cost because of vulnerability to climate change puts extra pressure on public investment. Cross-border private sector investment may provide excellent base for complements to public investment in production and employment generation. I am confident that our private sector are capable to make huge investment in producing goods and services that cater the need of South Asia. South Asia is gradually becoming the knowledge hub in global arena. Our climatic condition, our friendliness, nature, and comparative advantages in economic area boosts our opportunities. Only we need to little tweak in our governance reform initiatives, and success is there in sharing each other's potential and prosperity. Mr. Chair, during the sessions, we discussed on SARC and its performance. There is not encouraging situation. We need to put our efforts to make it a performing organization. We have no choice. Strengthening SARC and its subordination arrangement, SAFTA, must be our common objective for enhanced economic prosperity of the region and explore immense potentials. In the meantime, track 2 initiative like this summit in side by side would be very instrumental to building the blocks of trustworthy atmosphere in the region. I believe this kind of initiatives is very important to make common understanding among the member states. Mr. Chair, I am proud to be a part of hosting this important summit. I appreciate the tireless job performed by my colleagues at National Planning Commission, Secretariat, and Ministry of Commerce to make this event a successful one. Further, the outstanding performance of Saudi friends, led by Dr. Poshraj Pandey, is highly commendable. I also take this opportunity to thank all sponsors for their generous support to make this event happen in a very short period of time. Please accept my sincere apologies if there were any lapses in the management and arrangements. Your feedback will be counted as the lesson learning for future events. Finally, I once again thank the participants, speakers, and dignitaries for their presence and active participation. I hope you had some time to see around the Kathmandu. I wish you nice stay and safe journey back home. See you next year in 11th series of South Asian Economic Summit in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamsal, for highlighting some key aspects in terms of more connectivity within South Asia, and we definitely hope that these aspects are focused moving forward. Continuing the closing ceremony, I'd like to now invite Honorable Dr. Swarnim Wagle, Vice Chairman, National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal, for his closing remarks.
Mr. Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm actually not on the program, but the chief guest, the Honorable State Minister for Finance, Uday Rana, called me this morning and informed me that he's stuck in his campaign. It's a very tight election campaign that's going on, and he was unable to make it because he's in some remote village in Lalitpur district. So I'm just stepping in on his behalf. But I'll take this opportunity to share with you a few thoughts. I think overall, the event was a grand success, as participants and other speakers have highlighted. I'd like to thank you all for an enthusiastic participation and your valuable contributions to extending the frontiers of this discourse on South Asian integration. When Dr. Post Pandey mentioned to me the possibility of hosting this event in partnership with the government, I was initially hesitant because there are similar precedences happening in the infrastructure sector, in the energy sector, much more with the private groups. But this kind of a close, equal partnership between the government of Nepal and a think tank has not been practiced much. At least I'm not aware of it. So we thought this would be one of the first times when we did this. But looking to the future, we also thought this would set a precedence for this kind of a creative partnership where we bring forth the legitimacy of the government and the whole intellectual energy of a non-governmental actor and convene a regional forum such as this. But I was familiar with the reputation that this series has earned over the last 9 years. So in a sense, it was an honor for us too to participate and be a co-organizer of this event. I think this series is now firmly rooted in the South Asian landscape, and as we move forward to the next decade of the South Asian Economic Summit, we would be able to try out new things as well. I think one thing that struck me is perhaps we should try to widen the net a little bit. I am familiar with the usual crowd. I think you know each other very well, and you tend to meet each other in similar events in other capitals. Maybe now that we're now entering into the 11th year and onwards, maybe we should try and enroll new faces, youth groups, forge new alliances as well with universities, the chambers, the private sector apex bodies, parliaments, and other NGOs that also work on issues that go beyond this narrow sectors. The second thing that struck me is also, I think, time has now come to extend the knowledge frontiers. The traditional way has been to put all the discussions on in a proceedings in hard printed form and then share them. But now we know that there are lots of, because of the availability of cheap ICT technologies, I think we can rely on sort of the new innovations that we know exist. So perhaps it's time to go into this. The South Asian Economic Summit Academy, or some sort like that, ICT-based dissemination of new knowledge. We don't need to wait for these annual jamborees to really carry forth the discussions. Just like these massive open online courses, MOOCs, I think this network, this platform can actually go online throughout the year and extend these knowledge frontiers on the issues of South Asian economics and integration. The third area is perhaps, I think it's time to institutionalize this. The rotational arrangement works. I think it has worked for the last 10 years. But maybe we need a small permanent secretariat and an endowment, financial endowment. I think Ratnakarji mentioned the idea of a Saman Kalagama Fellowship. I would go a step further and say maybe we endow a small fund in his memory, so Kalagama endowment or something that can help institutionalize this process, especially if we are branching out and making it a much more fuller year-long engagement when it comes to knowledge dissemination and all that. And we also need to formalize some of the partnerships with the big players that have been helping this series from day one. The big institutions in the field of development, but also the big philanthropic entities that have now come up and are actually bigger and much more influential than some of the traditional actors. So I think we should widen the net, extend the knowledge frontiers, and work towards formalizing the institutionalization aspect of this, while retaining the fluidity and the flexibility that comes with this loose alliance. But I think maybe when you started, you didn't expect it to be so successful. So now that we've established it as a premier platform and a series in the region, I think the next decade we can expect to be much more ambitious. I was quite happy that this year we were able to, I think SAES, if you look back at the earlier summits, it tends to be fairly trade-centric, but we're now branching out, and that's a positive sign, and this is definitely a welcome direction. From the richness of the issues covered in the plenaries, touched on the SDGs, climate change, e-commerce, issues of economic measurement, youth, migration. So I think this is really the direction we ought to be taking. Trade continues to be the bedrock, but we need to branch out, and given that we now have a global compact in the area of development in the form of the SDGs, which covers almost everything, I think that gives us that anchor of legitimacy as well. But I do look at some of the other regional forums, ASEAN for example, where they tend to be more focused on financial and monetary discussions. And I think that's probably an area that has not been addressed sufficiently in this series, and we need to redress that imbalance. The other point I would like to make is the formal processes of regional integration, especially embodied by SAARC, is stalled. But that's why it's doubly important that forums, these Track 2 initiatives such as this one, continues to move along and hum along. And as I mentioned during the opening plenary 2 days ago, when these people-to-people ties, when these civic engagements sort of gather speed, governments then tend to play catch-up. And that's what we've seen happen elsewhere, and that's pretty much what we can expect in this region as well. But if the regional sort of pan-South Asian process is not moving at the pace that we would all like to see, hostage to certain political dynamics, I think the bilateral, the sub-regional, the people-to-people initiatives should move along. And I think this is a wonderful example of that process happening. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues at the National Planning Commission who sort of rose to the challenge of co-hosting such a big flagship event. I think it was quite unusual for, we've hosted big national events, but our experience in hosting regional and international events is not that regular. So I'd like to thank the Secretary of National Planning Commission, Mr. Bisnu Lamsal, the Joint Secretaries, Khomraj Koirala, Tulsi Gautam, and all the other sectoral chiefs who really stepped up and mobilized all their staff to work together to pull off this event. Even more importantly, I'd like to thank Sauti, our partner in this series, and which is actually a stakeholder of this whole process and has been involved as one of the 5 core constituents of the South Asia Economic Series. I'd like to thank Dr. Poshraj Pandey for shepherding this process along and forging this interesting and fruitful partnership with the government, both at the individual as well as the institutional level. And I'd like to thank all the participants, of course, the distinguished ladies and gentlemen and delegates who traveled far and wide to come all the way to Kathmandu and make this event a success. So thank you.
Thank you for your encouraging words, Honorable Dr. Swarnim Wagle, the Vice Chairman of National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal. And now for the vote of thanks, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Khomraj Koirala, Joint Secretary, National Planning Commission, Government of Nepal.
Thank you. Respected Chair, Honorable Vice Chairman, National Planning Commission, Honorable Member Secretary, National Planning Commission, respected Ayub Koyam Soleri, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of National Planning Commission and Ministry of Commerce of Government of Nepal and South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, it gives me a great pleasure to extend the sincere gratitude to you all for making the 10th South Asia Economic Summit a great success. I hope this event will help to create a new era of economic cooperation at a time when this region is eagerly looking forward to a more prosperous future. For contributing to this flagship event, I thank all the dignitaries who participated in the panels and plenaries. Your presence is a testament of your commitment to ensuring that when the economic promises of this region is fully realized, it is also inclusive and sustainable. We thank the Honorable Finance Minister for inaugurating the summit and underscoring the need to revive the original ethos of greater integration in South Asia. I also thank the Honorable Minister of Commerce for his commitment to advance a denser trade relationship in the region. I express my gratitude to Honorable Minister for Economic Affairs of Bhutan and the Honorable State Minister of Economic Development of Maldives for their strong supports to the agenda of regional cooperation. I am also grateful to Honorable Members of Parliament, Honorable Advisors, respected Secretaries of the region for their participation and contributions. I thank the Honorable Vice Chairman of National Planning Commission for his vision and inspiring leadership in steering the organization of this historic event. We have worked hard with the Ministry of Commerce for more than 1 month on this preparation of the event. Of course, I thank to my colleague at NPC, especially Macroeconomic Division and Human Resource Division and other divisions who have engaged and spent time for the preparation. I express the gratitude to South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment and its chairman for forging a deeply constructive relationship with the government in partnering the event. I also thank to other partners and co-organizers of the event. Finally, I thank the media, diplomats, former civil servants, experts, academics, and other participants of the government, civil society, and private sector for your enthusiastic contribution, and to all of our 4 plenary and 14 parallel sessions. The idea was to emerge in a rich set of deliberations in the perils and possibilities of charting the ambitious economic trajectory of the region. The next step is to channel some of the insights in the policy realm. I believe we have been successful in rejuvenating a constructive and informed dialogue in South Asia integration when other mechanism appears to have stalled somehow. I thank you all again and wish you a pleasant stay in Kathmandu and safe journey back to your hometown. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Mr. Khumraj Koirala. And now for the chairperson's concluding remarks, I'd like to invite Dr. Poshraj Pandey, Chairman, South Asia Water and Trade, Economics and Environment, SAES, Nepal.
Honorable Dr. Swarnim Wagle, Mr. Vishnu Prasad Lamshal, Secretary, National Planning Commission, Dr. Avid Shuleri, and distinguished participants. We all agree that this kind of mega event is a very challenging task. And Saudi expresses sincere gratitude to National Planning Commission and Ministry of Commerce for joining hands with Saudi in organizing this 10th South Asia Economic Summit, an initiative of South Asian think tank. We also like to thank our co-organizer, CPD Bangladesh, RIS India, SDPI Pakistan, and IPS Sri Lanka for all the supports, right from preparation of concept note to the identification of experts. We also appreciate the supports extended by our partners, the Asia Foundation, World Bank, Asian Development Bank, UNSCAP, WINREC International, and SASIP. I am here at the podium to deliver a valedictory statement, a speech, as a face of the organizer. But behind me, there is a group of young colleagues led by Mr. Raj Koirala, Joint Secretary, National Planning Commission, and Mr. Paras Kharel, Research Director, Saudi, assisted by Assis Subedi from Saudi, who worked day and night and took thankless job of logistic management and also preparing the proceedings to make this event a grand success. Let me read out the name of Saudi colleagues, and I request all of you to give them a big hand. Dr. Dhurvesh Chandra Regmi, Navraj Dahal, Hari Upreti, Nilu Thapa, please stand up. Prisha Khanal, Diksha Singh, Avinash Gupta, Kshitiz Dahal, Raksha Pradhan, Pravina Maharjan, Nina Shrestha, Pragati Koirala, Nirmal Sharma, Anurag Shrestha, Aditi Pokhrel, Alabbe Dahal, Adarsh Thapa, Dipankar Sharma, Alina Khadka, and Krishna Tamang. Well, Paras and his team has done a wonderful job preparing the summary of the proceedings of this event, both parallel session as well as plenary session. And he also presented the synopsis of the proceedings, highlighting the major issue discussed. And also, he presented the recommendations we made in our discussion. I don't want to summarize, all those issues. But, let me say, but we have discussed the issues for deepening economic integration, for inclusive and sustainable development in South Asia. We discussed the role of actors, that is state, market, and people. Market and people have been always integrating force. But state action has not been always supporting, if not disintegrating. We discussed institutions, formal, informal, government, non-governmental, and also private sector, and their role in taking forward this integration process. And we recommend that we need to redefine and reinvent formal institution. Maybe SARC Secretariat, or maybe the status of an observer, SARC observer, and others, formal committees. We also discuss the activities, and this is basically in our parallel session, and the activities that add value at domestic level, create positive externalities, and minimize negative externalities. And the issue we discussed were, it ranges from, in parallel sessions, from trade expansion, investment cooperation, e-trade, trade facilitation and connectivity, regional value chain, climate change, disaster management, economic measurement, among others. But here, my take from this summit for deepening integration is that we must reduce transaction costs in intra-regional economic activities and minimize cross-border externalities. We also need to improve institutional efficiency to reduce intra-regional and intranational inequalities and exclusion, and also for better delivery of services. The outcome of this summit will be published in a form of book. We might be requesting you, and basically the paper presenter, to refine your presentation. We'll also refine the proceedings and submit to the government of South Asian countries. And finally, I thank all participants for your engaging participation. I want to put on the record your contributions to make the summit successful. I also wish our foreign delegates safe and comfortable journey back home. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Poshraj Pandey. And also a big thank you to all our delegates and participants for making this 10th edition of South Asia Economic Summit a grand success through your participation and support. We really hope that you had a great time at the summit and also got some time to enjoy and explore Kathmandu We wish you all a safe return back home and wish STPI all the very best for a successful 11th edition of the South Asia Economic Summit in Pakistan. Thank you all and have a good evening ahead.